Okay, cool. What is going on, everyone? So today, really excited to have a special guest for this one. So we have Rebekah Subit. So if you guys didn't know, she's one of our clients here. Um, uh, and you've been a client of ours since last February, at the beginning of last February. So
hmm
around how many? What is that? Like 17? No, 15-ish months. Um, so it's been really cool, like working with you over this time period. And if you weren't aware, Rebecca and I actually did like a two-part podcast. When was it? That was um, probably around February-ish, I think.
Yeah. Yep. I think so.
So probably a few months ago, we did a two-part podcast, like really highlighting her journey and a lot of the things she overcame as far as learning how to eat more food, learning how to accept maybe the scale going up, and that's what's actually best for her body. So she had a lot of mental breakthroughs there. So if you want to listen to her story there, definitely check that podcast episode out. You can just search our podcast, The Dietitian's Take, and scroll down. Should be somewhere in February, like I said. And if you struggle to find the link, just DM me and I can send you the link directly because um, Rebecca's story was pretty incredible of just everything she's overcome to this point. And I think it's something that a lot of women, especially, probably should hear. Don't you think?
Absolutely. I wish I would have heard it about 10 years ago. Because I think one of the things that I kind of realized when we were recording that podcast was that I've probably been like worried about my weight or dieting in some form like my entire adult life. So yeah, I think it's super important for people to hear.
Yeah, that was a really powerful episode. And it's cool to sit down with you and record another one now, like because like I think when we recorded that podcast episode, you were kind of nervous before, weren't you? If I remember right.
hmm
Um, and I feel like it was like a big step for you to kind of like step into that. And um, after that podcast and just working with you, like I could definitely see you becoming like a leader in this area and helping to influence, women and to not undereat all the time and to not try these super low 1,000 calorie diets. And now we're hopping on another podcast to talk a little bit about your experience too with some of these. If you didn't see the title of this episode or this video, we're going to talk about the phases that we take clients through. But I think it's just another example of you kind of stepping into that role of just being a leader, like while you're still learning and still going through this, and you're still obviously a client, you're also a leader for a lot of our other clients and a lot of people who are in the group that aren't clients too.
Yeah, I mean, talking about that, and I think I remember talking to you about like when we would first post some of the progress pictures, which before this, there is absolutely no way I would have ever put a picture of me in my underwear on social media. Never. Like, probably not for a million, well, maybe for $1 million, but I just wouldn't have done it. And, I've just realized like it's just so important. And I still don't just freely do it, but every now and then I think it's good to show like the progress that I've made, um, and for other women to be able to see that because it's just so important that just for women to understand like it's okay that with the scale going up and being able to eat more and making and purposefully changing your body and purposefully changing your weight and how much you eat, and it's okay to put yourself out there. So that was a huge breakthrough for me, I think, was just like putting it out there. And now I've done it on my own a couple times, just putting pictures of myself up, without you having to do it for me or ask or black my face out or any of those things. So that was a big breakthrough.
Yeah, I think just being confident in like what you've achieved and also being confident in like your beginning pictures, maybe they weren't where you wanted to be. And maybe even like your pictures now aren't 100% where you want to be because you're always setting new goals and everything, but you're feeling confident in the progress, like the change that you are making. And I think too, you when you do that and you start to post your own progress and you do it in a way where you're trying to inspire some other people, or like trying to show them, hey, you can achieve this result, and this is a result that a lot of people or a lot of women, in your opinion, probably want, like this kind of physical change. You can achieve this by actually eating more. You can achieve it by actually gaining weight and not being so focused on losing weight. You can achieve it by not killing yourself with cardio. You can achieve it with like by good means and not hopping on like crash diets and things. And it's super important. And it almost like, at least for me, when I started sharing my journey back in like 2014, when I first started posting on social media, it gave me like a new purpose because I wasn't just posting for myself. I was posting for the people who could potentially stumble upon that and it could potentially help. And I think you've kind of probably felt that same way too.
Yeah, I mean, I have tried to in other groups that I'm in, I've tried to just spread a little bit of like the word around the fact that it's okay to eat more and it's okay to gain weight, and the responses have just been like incredible because there's so many women who were like me who just did the endless amounts of cardio, and that is not how you're going to get there, to get to the body that you want, that's a healthy and sustainable way to live. So that's been really like empowering for me to feel like I can be a voice, um, to try to help other women to change their thought process and their lifestyles on how they go about it, and how they go about dieting and eating and their workouts.
Yeah. And two, like not to just like go on a riff on this point, but it also like helps you adopt that identity of being somebody who like you're always trying to progress, you're always setting new goals, you're always trying to be an inspiration for somebody. You kind of take on that identity in that role, and then it makes those behaviors that are aligned with that identity or who that type of person is almost like easier to follow because it's who you feel like you like are, like you're becoming that person. I've been talking a lot about identity. I sent like a voice message in the client group chat the other day about um just like identity changes too, but I think like what we identify as uh, plays a big role in what behaviors we just kind of naturally gravitate towards. um but I wanted to bring Rebekah on here and talk about the 5 phases that we take all of our clients through, and um, why these phases are so important for every like long-term successful transformation. Because Rebekah, if you haven't seen her progress pictures, she's really transformed her body over the past 15 months. Um, and she's gone through all of these 5 phases in some capacity. So I wanted to hop on here and talk with her about her experience with each of these phases. Then obviously, I'll explain like what each phase is. But kind of first, before we dive into all that, have you ever like, I know you had experience with tracking macros and tracking things, tracking your food in the past. Have you ever taken this approach of having like this many different phases and having like distinct like periods of time that are devoted towards this and then distinct periods of times devoted towards that?
No, and that's been one of the big changes for me. Like I would track and really never go into maintenance and never go into purposefully trying to build. And I think that was a big part of the problem, is that I would be so strict with what I was eating. And I mean, there were vacations and things like that in there, but then I would get right back to that same amount, tracking macros and being really strict, like plus or minus 5 on carbs, fat, and protein. And there's just not a lot of room for flexibility with that. And there was definitely I definitely didn't I wasn't doing any changing that up at all or going into different stages or going into maintenance, going into build phase or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't do. Like they don't do these distinct phases, and they they think there's like this like magical number or this set like calorie range or protein number that they need, and they're like, "Hey, what should my calories be to get results?" But that calorie goal changes depending on what phase you're in or what phase you're going through, and it's not like a magic number where, like, I talk with a lot of people through DMs all the time, and try to help them as much as I can, if they're not one-on-one clients. Like I try to give them some kind of feedback and direction. But I've had so many people ask me, "Hey, can you like just tell me like how many calories I should be eating, or um, write me out like a one time like meal plan with a certain calorie number?" But it's like, I mean, I could, but that calorie number is only gonna work for a short duration of time until your body adapts or until it's ready for your body to go into a different phase, and then you actually need a new goal. So like I could give you that, but it's probably only going to be a short-term solution. And if you do follow it forever, your results will stop happening. So you need like these phases, and within these phases you need different calorie goals to shoot for. And that's why like it's so hard to like give somebody a one time like calorie goal or macro goal, because like with coaching now, and like I obviously know from working with clients, like we're adjusting things like all the time. Like maybe it's not a huge adjustment every single week, but like in a span of a few months, like your calorie goals are going to adjust and change. So it's not just like my body needs this and this is what it needs forever. It changes depending on, what your body adapts to, what phase you're in, how long you've been in the previous phase, and so on.
Yeah, and I've seen a direct correlation with that too, with the calorie increase and then gaining strength in my training. I mean, it's just been mind blowing, honestly, like increasing the calories and how my strength just PR after PR after PR. Um, and that's been so like exciting for me because I put such an importance on working out and training. And now that I know, more about that I need a ton of extra calories to start to hit those PRs. I'm not afraid of the next phase that we go into. And if I start gaining weight, that's okay. And it's not going to take me near as long mentally to adjust to that.
Yeah, and I think too, like with the phases, it makes it. I don't know. In my experience, I could see how it can make it the whole journey, the whole process a little bit more exciting in a sense too, because if you're going like switching phases, like say every few months you're going into a different phase, like your goal and objective then changes with depending on what your phase you're in. So you're always kind of like changing your goal slightly. Like the goal is overall is to always kind of improve your strength, improve your body composition, improve, how you feel and everything. But the goals every 3 months change slightly kind of based on that. So you kind of like in a fat loss phase, right? You're getting excited for the like seeing your body like get leaner week to week or things like that. But then you go into like a building phase, then you start to get excited about like your legs or your glutes starting to feel bigger, and then you go into a maintenance phase and you're excited to have more calories for your performance to feel a little bit better. So there's like different focuses there, that I think make the overall journey and process more exciting versus like if I were to tell you, okay, your calorie range is 1900 to 2000, and that's what you need to eat for the rest of your life for like 2 years straight, right? Like that's um probably can get boring, like not changing up those phases too if you're always just kind of focusing on that same number all the time.
Yeah. And I think it has given me a new goal um to hit. Like, oh my gosh, can I really eat this much food? Or, oh, can I really stick to this? Like when we've been in this most recent fat loss phase after eating that much, and then thinking, okay, well, here's a new target to hit. Here's a new challenge for me. And I've done really well and really excited about it. So it's definitely worked for me, and having these different goals to look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. And also like it mentally is a good challenge, but then physically it's it's necessary if you want to keep progressing. So let's dive into these five phases. And what I kind of want to do is go through like each one and talk a little bit about like your experience with each one, things that you felt, what each one looked like, what the point of each phase is, and so on. So the first phase, and I'll try to go in order of like the phases that our clients go through. It kind of depends on where they are coming into our program at. But for the most part, most clients will go in this direction that I'm kind of going to talk about. So the first phase that we'll talk about is what I call the priming phase, or some people have probably heard of this called the reverse diet phase, which this phase is where, like, if you join our program and you've been under eating for a pretty long time, like you were eating, I think, if I remember right, was it around like 13, maybe 14, 1,500 calories when you first joined?
Yeah, probably 15-ish, 1500-ish, I would say.
Right. And you were eating around 1,500-ish. And I know you came in wanting to lose weight, wanting to lose fat, and that was your main goal, but you weren't really seeing progress there. And when we kind of like throw your information, when I do an assessment and figure out like what how many calories you should be able to eat and maintain your weight, how many calories you should have to eat to lose weight, the 1,500 mark, like you should have been seeing some kind of fat loss at that point when you joined. So the fact that you weren't, and you had been eating like that probably for a while, or at least trying to, um, tells us that you probably need this like reverse diet phase to kind of bring your calories up to that like 2,000 mark, um, uh, to not only like get your metabolism to a better spot to lose weight, but also to kind of um, reverse some of like the negative symptoms like hunger or your lack of sleep that you were having, or lack of good quality sleep that you're having before we enter into that fat loss phase. So you were in the reverse diet phase, or the priming phase, for I think it was around 2 months, and we brought your calories from like 1,400 to 1,500 up to, I believe, around 2,000. It was kind of when we started, maybe like slightly above 2,000, or when we ended.
Yep, I think so. Um, Probably 2000 or 2100, I believe. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I just remember feeling like it was a lot of food.
Yeah. So a quick rundown, like, two of when we did that over the past like 2 months, we didn't just go from straight like 1,400 all the way up to 2,000. We gradually increased that. So I think we did around like 150 calorie maybe increases throughout that like 8 week period. But some weeks we had like 2 weeks in a row where maybe we didn't make a change because you were feeling super full and your body just wasn't digesting things well. So we wanted to let your body have a little bit more time to adjust to the higher calorie mark. But the whole premise of this priming phase is to, if you're under eating compared to where your maintenance calories should be, is to slowly bring those up to that maintenance calorie range. But do it, slowly. That way, it's not such a huge shock to like your body, your digestive system, and things like that. Um, so during this phase, what were some like things that you were maybe experiencing like right before, and some things that you were experiencing as you went through that process?
Well, right before I started working with you, I talked about this before in the podcast, but I wouldn't sleep at all. I had trouble falling asleep. I would wake up in the middle of the night around 1 or 2, and I could not go back to sleep. And a lot of times, I would be up from 1 or 2 in the morning, and then I'd go and work out, to at 5 a.m. CrossFit class, and just go all day, and then think, okay, finally I can go to sleep, and then was just wide awake, could not go to sleep. And I remember it was probably 1 or 2 weeks after we started building my calories up, and I fell asleep on the floor with my son. He wanted to have like a camp out or a slumber party, and I fell asleep on the floor. of all places with him and slept all through the night. And I just thought, what happened? And there's really no other explanation except for the fact that I was eating more and my body got what it needed. So it wasn't like alert trying to find food. So that was super eye-opening in those first couple of weeks. Which I'm still so thankful for. Because I would, try different things, melatonin and um meditations and all kinds of different things to help me sleep, and nothing would work except for food.
Yeah, I remember that being like one of the first things that you mentioned, and it's probably one of the most common things that we see, like other than like just having more energy through the day because you're eating more food. But like one of the things that people don't really expect to improve, but ends up improving if they are under eating and we start to increase calories is their sleep. And there are a few possible explanations for that. Like one, your overall hunger um is just lower because you're eating more food throughout the day, so you're able to sleep better. Because, like, have you ever tried going to sleep super hungry? It's not very easy. And there's probably some kind of like evolutionary part behind that, like you described. Like when you're restricting your food, your body is telling your mind, like, hey, there's not food around, you need food to survive. So you need to stay up to look for more food around. Versus just like go to sleep and starve to death, right? Like that's kind of evolutionary background of why that might be occurring. And also too, could have to do with cortisol too. So cortisol is kind of our stress hormone that a lot of people probably associate that with. And cortisol, the lower your carbs are, cortisol tends to be a little bit higher. So if you're eating super low calories, your carbs are probably a lot lower. So cortisol might be higher. And one way to decrease cortisol is to eat more carbs. So us increasing your calories increased your carbs, but then also probably decrease cortisol a little bit. And other than just like the general stress response you get from cortisol, cortisol also helps us to be alert, also helps us to wake up. You have a natural rise in cortisol every morning that helps you to kind of wake up in the morning, especially when sunlight is coming up and you're waking up with the sun. And then you tend to have a natural decrease in cortisol at night. So by giving your body more food, more carbs, it's probably helping to get your body to actually decrease your cortisol levels naturally, like it should do in the evening. That way, you're able to actually fall asleep and stay more sound asleep too. Um, so better sleep. What are some other things that you were kind of noticing in that first phase?
Um, just more energy, I think, and having better workouts and feeling more energized during the workouts and just feeling more energized during the day overall.
Gotcha. So, more energy, better workouts, all things that we typically see in this first phase. Um, and one thing that didn't quite happen in this first phase was fat loss. So that's something that sometimes we do see some clients lose fat in this phase, but it's not extremely typical. Usually this phase is focused on, the main priority and the objective of it is to get your metabolism to a healthy spot, get your body overall to a healthy spot where you're sleeping soundly, you have high energy throughout the day, your performance is great in the gym. That way, you're kind of checking all these boxes and really putting yourself in a good position to see the most success when we go into the fat loss phase next. So, like, was that very difficult for you, like putting the fat loss phase in that a little bit on the back burner?
From what I remember, yeah, it was so long ago. I'm trying to remember back through all these, but um I feel like I thought to myself, well, I could have done all this by myself. Um like I don't know why did I do this? I'm not losing any weight. Like this isn't what I signed up for. Um so yeah, I mean that was difficult in that aspect because when I came to you, like I felt like I needed to lose weight, or I don't know what I thought at that when I look back at those pictures. So yeah, that part I was like, well, I don't know about this. I'll do my time here and then probably just do this myself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they didn't end up happening, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, because, and I don't want to dive too into like the exact journey of yours, because we recorded that other podcast of it, but we did this priming and reverse diet phase, and because you had just been under eating for such a long period of time beforehand, and the spot that your body was in, and it was already like pretty lean, and it was to a point where your body really didn't want to lose any more fat, or it was kind of like sending off these alarms, having all these negative side effects saying you're getting too lean, like this isn't healthy for you. So we kind of went from, we attempted a fat loss phase, but we pretty much went from the priming phase or reverse diet phase into a building phase, which is kind of a different route than what a lot of our clients go through, but some of them do. Um, so this like building phase for you was geared towards actually like the priming phase. We brought your calories up to maintenance. So we are kind of eating the same amount as what your calorie or what your body burned per day. The building phase, we actually aim to purposely go a little bit above that. And I know that was probably like, I know it was a big challenge for you like during that time. So kind of talk about that, like what that look like, that decision to do it, and also like actively doing it, what that felt like.
Yeah, I remember still that conversation we had when you were telling me what your thoughts were, that you thought I needed to eat a surplus and spend and back off of the cardio and gain weight, and I just thought you were crazy. I was like, there's no way I can do this. And I thought about it for a while and then just went for it. And it was really challenging for me at first. It took a long time to accept like the scale going up, and but I just thought if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be all in and I'm going to trust that he knows what he's doing. And so we did. And I also remember throughout that process, like, why did I ever do this? Like, my clothes aren't ever going to fit me again. I worked so hard to get to that point where I was comfortable, like, with my body, and now I just feel huge. And this was a horrible idea. I can't wait for this to be over. I'm just going to go back to my old ways. So all those different thoughts going through my head, but also, along with the negative, there was also a lot of positive ones. Eating a lot more, just falling asleep so easily, strength increasing, performance in the gym. And so it was a lot of back and forth and balance and therapy sessions with you. And I would send you a voice message like, oh, I feel horrible. This is awful. I'm so bloated. My clothes don't fit. And then you would talk me down, and then I would calm down for a week, and then the next week we'd have a couple more days like that. So it was good and bad, I would say, but a lot of mental changes and overcoming some of those mental blocks with seeing the scale go up and just feeling larger than I was used to. So that was a tough phase, but I do feel like absolutely necessary, and I would do it again for sure.
Yeah, and something too, like, that I wanted to emphasize with this too is like, I'm going to talk about 5 different phases. So this is the second one we're talking about, which is kind of the building phase. Rebekah liked to call it Operation Get Jacked, but you can call it a building phase, calorie surplus phase, whatever it is. This second phase, I would say, is pretty specific to people who are already pretty lean and their body is just like very resistant towards getting leaner. If you're in a spot where you maybe have a lot of body fat that you want or need to lose, this building phase might not be as necessary for you. So I just wanted to put that disclaimer in there, that this building phase is a little bit more necessary for the situation that like Rebekah was in. But if you're not in that situation, then you can kind of learn about this building phase, but think, okay, maybe I don't really need that now. And these other 4 phases that we're going to talk about are probably maybe a little bit more relevant to you. So the building phase, yeah. So like I said, the building phase is about bringing your calories a little bit above your maintenance. So you're purposely eating a little bit more calories than what you burn to put your body in a better spot to build muscle. Because for you, you wanted to get leaner, but getting leaner wasn't really a possibility without putting muscle first on, because your body fat level was already at a percentage where your body really didn't want to get any lower, as far as like the amount of actual body fat you had on yourself. Um, but building muscle allows you to actually achieve a lower body fat percentage without actually having to lose body fat necessarily. Because if you have let's say 20 pounds of fat and 20 pounds of muscle, right? That's not realistic for like an actual person. Like those aren't the right numbers. But let's just say 20 and 20, right? That's 50% of that weight is body fat. So your body fat percentage is 50% in that random example. But if we take that 20 pounds of muscle that you had and spend time building more, so maybe you have 30 pounds of muscle and 20 pounds of fat, then your actual body fat in pounds hasn't changed. You actually haven't lost body fat, but your body fat percentage will be lower, right? Because 20 pounds out of the total 50 pounds, if you have 30 pounds of muscle, is less than 20 pounds of the total 40 pounds that you would have if you only had 20 pounds of muscle. So building that extra 10 pounds of muscle is a way to decrease your body fat percentage so you actually look leaner without actually having to lose like actual fat tissue or fat on your body. So that's kind of where you were at, where we couldn't really lose any more fat tissue without dealing with those negative side effects. So instead, we purposely went into a phase to build muscle tissue so we could decrease your body fat percentage without actually having to lose the body fat, if that makes sense. So that was the phase that you were in. And with that phase comes eating a little bit more calories than what you burn. So like in your case, we were around like 100 to 200 calories more than what you burned like each day. So a little bit of a surplus, which is enough to feel like a little bit full, like those feelings you were talking about of feeling a little bit more bloated on some days, maybe your clothes feeling a little bit tighter on some days. And it's like a really hard mental thing to push through because like you don't want your clothes to feel tighter. You're like, I'm working on my nutrition and I'm working out. Like like all of my history of looking at magazines or reading about other people talking about their experiences, they're always talking about my clothes fitting bigger or my clothes fitting looser. They're never talking about my clothes fitting tighter. So why am I purposely feel like I'm taking myself in the opposite direction? But it's a really hard mental thing to break through, but I think you did a really great job of doing that. And I think you did a really great job of like, I guess, reaching out and leaning on me when you had to, because it probably could have been like really easy for you or somebody else to just like disconnect. They're like, oh, my coach is making me eat more food. Like, this is really hard mentally. I'm just not going to do it. I'm just going to not check in with him. I'm going to not communicate with him and not express these thoughts. But I think you did a great job at like whenever things were bothering you, you expressed those, and that gave me like the opportunity to then talk you through it too.
Yeah, I couldn't have done that on my own at all. I would have, when I first started to see this scale increase, I just would have backed off and, um, gone back to what I knew. And I always say the other thing that I realize now, like the fact that I was gaining weight, um, and people were probably noticing like, well, she works out all the time. Why is she gaining weight? And I did think about that, and I just had to block that out of my head that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, but long term, this is going to be the best solution for me. Um, so luckily, it coincided with Christmas and Thanksgiving and the holidays, so that's it was okay to gain weight then. 15 pounds.
Yeah. Well, I also think too, you mentioned the thought of other people noticing that and thinking that you're like letting yourself go, or, you know, I bet you probably not very many people noticed at all, if any. Um, I don't know if you had anybody like come up to you and say that they noticed, but I'm assuming most people probably didn't notice, like, and they probably wouldn't have really thought of anything different. And that kind of falls back on like us. We're always so critical of ourselves, and we are so easy for us to pick apart like, oh, this area is looking bigger, this area is looking this way and different, and other people just don't notice because it's
Yeah.
really not as big of a difference as what it actually is. It's just our mind almost like playing tricks on us, and like, we feel our shorts be like a little extra tight, and we're like, oh my god, like I feel like a whale or something like that. And it's not usually not that as extreme as like the stories we tell ourselves in our head about it.
Absolutely. Yep. And they weren't just a little bit tight, they were a lot tight.
But so the thing is too with that is like the purpose of that phase and what we talked about was you building muscle. And like I there are a lot of women who I've talked with that have signed on who they want to build muscle, but they freak out when the scale goes up or when their clothes start to maybe fit a little tighter. But the thing is, if you're building muscle, you're putting on extra like mass or tissue on your body that your body didn't originally have, right? Like that's the definition of building muscle. You're putting some kind of, you know, material, tissue, muscle tissue on your body that you didn't previously have. So if you're putting on extra mass on your body that you didn't have before, it has to go somewhere and has to take up some kind of space. And your shorts just happen to be like your measurement of like how much space it's taking up. But
Yeah.
the problem is you, not you necessarily, but people like they associate having to go up a size in shorts as being like a bad thing, where that could actually be a good thing. And I think like, for you, and you've talked about this a lot. One of the like spots that you I think are really proud of what you've grown and improved in the muscle building phase is like your thighs and your glutes and things, and like those are the areas that are going to make your shorts feel tighter, but those are the areas that I think you're most proud of for growing and building too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like I'm totally fine with it now. But at the time in that
Right.
phase, it was hard. But again, like just kept on trusting the process and pushing through, and now on the other side of it, I feel fantastic and strong, and I know we'll get to like um the other phases, but now that I've gone through the fat loss phase, and I I feel really great, and um so I don't have any complaints now.
Yeah, it's definitely harder to go through in the moment for sure, because and even like fat loss phases, it's always harder in the moment too. Like you're eating a little bit less food in the fat loss phase, which we'll kind of get to next, but eating a little bit less food, a little bit hungrier, you're you're like, why am I doing this, right? Like this doesn't feel fun sometimes. And I have to be more disciplined. I have to, while I can include like cookies and things, I have to use a little bit more moderation than if you're in like a building phase or a maintenance phase, versus the fat loss phase. So you have those same thoughts in a fat loss phase of like, this is hard. Like some days you just don't feel as great. Some days you're wondering like why you're doing this. You have those same thoughts in a fat loss phase versus like a building phase, but they just kind of take a slightly different form.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, cool. So building phase, increasing your calories a little bit above maintenance. That way you can purposely put on muscle. And the thing too about like purposely putting on muscle, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't care about adding more muscle. I just want to look leaner." But putting on more muscle will, like I said before with the body composition thing and the body fat percentage, it will help you look leaner in the long run that way. And also it will help just like your proportions. If you grow like your shoulders a little bit or your back a little bit, and not saying get like Mr. Olympia, like super wide shoulders where you can't walk through doorways. But like if you increase the size of your shoulders and back a little bit, and then increase the size of, your glutes and your hamstrings and your quads a little bit, and then, your waist, you go into a fat loss phase and you lose inches on your waist or lose fat in your waist, it will overall make your waist actually look even a little thinner because those other areas are a little bit more built out and it'll just give you more shape, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the building phase. So we went through the building phase for it was around like 3 or 4 months that we were solidly in that building phase. So next we went into the fat loss phase then after spending most of the past like 10-ish months in pretty much either building calories up in the priming phase or in the building phase. Now we officially like went back into a fat loss phase this January. Um, and because we spent so much time with you increasing your calories, building muscle, your body was in a lot better spot to actually lose fat then. So if you can remember, like, how different did you feel in this fat loss phase in the beginning and starting to see progress versus like the first one we tried where you weren't really like your body wasn't really letting you lose fat?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that it was slow, and that's good. Like there wasn't any crash diets or cutting calories in huge numbers, um compared to, the way that I would have done it 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And then I think the way that a lot of people do, like, well, I have 5 weeks to get my summer body, and this has been 5 months in the making. So we took time, slowly decreased things, and then we would have times where we increased things. And then it also allowed me to, I've had a vacation, I've had parties and birthdays and sicknesses and illness and all kinds of different things like in the past 5 months, which is why it did take a little longer than what I would have thought, because we have to allow for life to happen. And instead of, if I would have gotten sick before, um, you know, I would have just continued to cut things back, or if I would have gone on vacations before, then still needed to feel like restrictive on a vacation. And, with these built-in breaks that we've had, um, it's just helped my body to function so much better to where I'm not like feeling like I have to keep things cut back. Like, oh, I went on vacation, now I have to restrict everything and be really, really strict for the next 6 weeks or whatever it might be. Um, so I do think it just allowed for a lot of flexibility. Even though we've been in a fat loss phase, I've had, like I said, multiple times where I haven't been in a fat loss phase.
Yeah. So I think like a big thing that you mentioned was just setting a really realistic timeline and not giving yourself like cutting your time short of when you want to achieve something. Like we started this, I think it was in January, this fat loss phase, and we're kind of not entirely done. We're doing like a diet break right now, which we'll talk about kind of next. But um we've been in a fat loss phase for that long, but your calories haven't been as low or that low that long. Like we've had diet breaks sprinkled in between with those things you mentioned. And it just allows you to actually make smart decisions with the fat loss phase and not make rash decisions of cutting calories drastically, adding in a bunch of cardio when you don't necessarily need it. Because it really takes like 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks consistently hitting, your calorie range, hitting your workouts, hitting your steps to know if you're actually in a plateau or not and need to make a change. Like that's just how long it really takes, especially for women because of the hormone fluctuations you see like month to month with your cycle and everything. Like you could be holding on to a lot more water on 1 week where it's making it seem like you're not really losing weight. And then, on week 4, when your hormones kind of go back to where they were on week 4 the previous month, you realize, oh, shoot, I lost like 3 pounds, 3 or 4 pounds this past month. And you just didn't know that because you didn't give it enough time. So, giving yourself that longer timeline allows you to have a week or two where your weight might not necessarily change before, and not like resort to cutting calories. Because if you only give yourself 5 weeks to lose 5 pounds, and you go 2 to 3 weeks with the scale not really budging, even though your clothes might be fitting better on week 2 or 3, because you're only giving yourself a 5 week window, you're probably going to cut calories when maybe you didn't really have to. And maybe cutting calories is maybe the wrong thing to do at that point, and you're going to run yourself into the ground a little bit more. So, I think that was a really important point you made, of just giving yourself ample amount of time for the fat loss phase. So what the fat loss phase looks like I know some people are like, so what do you do? Do you like ramp up the cardio? Do you change all of your food choices? Do you start intermittent fasting or something crazy like that? With the fat loss phase, all we typically do is, we've at this point we've established what your kind of maintenance calories is, so how many calories you burn per day roughly. So we typically just bring that down by anywhere from 3 to 500. Usually it's close to 500, but that's how we start the fat loss phase. So making sure you're eating, maybe that much less than what you burn per day. And then going from there. And that's what the fat loss phase looks like. And um then this kind of brings me to like my next point, or the next question I get from people is, how long should you be in a fat loss phase for? So like the general fat loss phase that we've been in has been around 4 to 5 months or so, but we haven't been eating fat loss calories for that long. So inside of the fat loss phase, we do the fourth, I guess, phase we're talking about, which are the diet breaks. So you could kind of include diet breaks and say, okay, they're included in the fat loss phase, or you can use it as like a separate phase in its own. But diet breaks are what we implement throughout the long-term fat loss phase, um, that make actually trying to lose fat for that long actually doable. Because if you're consistently in a deficit for 4 to 5 months straight, you're gonna probably crash and burn long before then. So the diet breaks, how you mentioned them was, we implemented them when you had vacations, when you were maybe sick, when you were maybe just feeling a little bit hungrier or run down a little bit from the fat loss phase after a little bit of time. um so maybe like have you explain what your experience was with the diet breaks and what those look like for you.
Yeah, there's a couple things that I wanted to mention too. Um, First, I know we've been in this fat loss phase for that long, and but I would say like the first part of it, I probably wasn't tracking accurately, and I think we talked about that too. Like, well, I've been kind of eating a little bit here and there and not tracking everything and really being kind of loose with it. But once I really hammered down and started eating what I was actually tracking, like things ramped up quite a bit. So that was one thing. So I would say even like the first several weeks to months that I was still, not really in a fat loss phase, but don't tell my coach that. Um, and then the other thing I wanted to like really highlight before I started working with you, if I was trying to get, be in a fat loss phase, that I would have been running and doing lots of cardio and probably running 3 miles multiple times a week. And the only thing, well, besides my usual workouts that I've been doing, like going to CrossFit and lifting, the only thing I've been doing differently in the fat loss phase is walking, which has been like really good for my body. We've increased the steps to 11,000 instead of 8 or 10,000. And it's just like mentally really good that I don't have to go down to the treadmill and hammer it out to run, and feel like I can lose weight that way. So that was one thing I just wanted to mention. And I'm sorry, my driveway alarm keeps going off, so that's what that dinging is. The grass is getting mowed.
Well, I
So,
can't hear the dinging at all. So,
oh, good.
um,
Okay.
but yeah, you made a really good point. And like with the fat loss phase, we want to keep overall like stress as low as possible, keep recovery as high as possible while achieving that deficit that we need to, see fat loss. So that's why like we really try to not change much of like from your exercise routine versus like what you were doing before, other than maybe increasing like just your overall low intensity movement, aka steps throughout the day, and then also making those nutrition changes too. Um, so the diet breaks, uh, when we implemented them, they were either, when you had a vacation, when you had something else pop up, or a weekend like where you were traveling or something, or we would do them roughly, I would say usually every like 6 weeks or so for you. That'll look different from client to client, but um, the purpose of these diet breaks are to take around like 2 weeks, usually is how long we implement them. Sometimes it's 1 week, sometimes it's as long as maybe 3, maybe even 4 weeks, but typically 2 weeks long. And what we do is we do a little bit of an increase in calories. So if like you're eating 1,500 because your maintenance is 2,000 and you're trying to lose fat, that first week maybe we'll bring your calories up to 17 to 1,800. Let your body kind of adjust to that slightly higher calorie mark. And then that second week, bring your calories up to maybe 2,000, kind of up to maintenance. And then let your body adjust to that maintenance calories again for a week before going back into the fat loss phase. And the purpose of doing this, which is so important, is to help reduce hunger, because as you're in a fat loss phase, the longer the amount of weeks you're in one, eating the lower calorie mark, your hunger is going to continue to kind of creep up as those weeks go on. So the diet break is a way to kind of reset hunger a little bit there. It's also a way to mentally just kind of give you a break from eating lower calories, help your workouts feel a little bit better, have more energy in the gym to maybe hit some PRs there. And then it's also really helpful for weeks or weekends where you're traveling, to where, okay, like I don't you're not putting stress on yourself to eat a lower calorie amount or be in the fat loss phase um while you're on vacation or while you're traveling. And instead you're adjusting your goal, and there's still purpose, right? It still comes with all those benefits I just mentioned, but it gives you that kind of mental break and allows you to have more flexibility of eating a little bit more food during those times where you really want to, like if you're traveling or if you are on vacation. So that's typically when we implement those. And there's like a really good purpose physically, like physiologically and mentally behind those. Um, so what are kind of like some thoughts that you have regarding the diet breaks, or when we've implemented them, like how helpful they've been with sticking to like the plan long term, or any thoughts that you have regarding those?
Yeah, the other thing that I forgot about that I've had quite a few of are like competitions, workout competitions where uh, we have we've known that those were on the horizon. So 1 to 2 to 3 maybe weeks leading up to those, we've increased calories. So um, again, like before, I wouldn't have done that. And I wouldn't have increased calories 3 weeks before so that I could feed my body like it needed to be. Um, and so that's one thing that I forgot to mention earlier. And then, but yeah, just the mental break during those. It's hard both ways, I think, like when you are restricting yourself um, at a lower number to stay that way. But then I think it's also hard on the flip side, like, oh, good, I get to eat this many more calories this week, but oh gosh, am I going to gain weight? And so that was another hurdle that I've had to get over, which I have, and now I'm like, all right, my body's ready. Let's just eat some more, and then I know like that it'll all be fine. Like my body's gonna be okay.
Yeah. So I think you kind of alluded to a couple of really good points there, and one is the importance of the diet breaks. Two, like with showing you and helping to break that mental barrier of if I eat more food, I'm going to gain weight, and you do it during the process of fat loss, right? Like you're doing it in the middle as you go throughout your journey versus losing a bunch of weight and then trying to deal with that huge mental burden at the end. So I think that's really helpful of showing you like after you've lost, 4 pounds or so, okay, we're going to increase calories over these next 2 weeks by 4 to 500. And like you freaking out because you think you're going to gain that weight back. And then you see that you actually don't, like maybe the scale goes up a pound from just extra water because you just have more food going through your system, and that helps to pull and retain a little bit more water. It's just a natural body process that happens. But you see and learn firsthand as you go through your journey, okay, I can be in this deficit and be in this fat loss phase and lose, this weight. If I increase my calories by 4 to 500 from there, like I'm not going to just balloon up and retain everything back. It helps to mentally break through that barrier. And then also like long term maintenance of your weight loss is the hardest thing for so many people. Like I've had so many conversations with people who have lost 30 pounds in their lifetime, but they've lost it like 4 or 5 times. So total, they've lost
Mhm.
like 150 pounds throughout their whole entire life, but they always gain it back. And the problem is a lot of times people go into fat loss phase, lose the 30 pounds over the next 6 to 9 months, and they lose it completely straight without ever having these like planned structured breaks. And they never teach themselves or learn how to maintain that weight loss along the way, which that's a really important purpose of these diet breaks too, is to like mentally show you can eat more and not gain the weight back, but then also just to like for you to learn what maintenance feels like and do that along the way. So then once you've like lost 30 pounds total, you already the last time you were on a diet break, you maintained your 24 pound or 25 pound weight loss for a few weeks. So you're like, okay, now I'm at 30 pounds total weight loss. That's not that daunting to maintain because I know I can maintain 25 pounds. So if I can maintain 25 pounds down, I should be able to maintain 30 pounds down. So you're like learning how to maintain that along the way. And that's a huge, huge benefit for people too.
Yeah, and it's been helpful for me, and now I can't wait. Like yesterday we went on a diet break and I'm so excited. Just like eating so much more food, and it's just it makes it fun.
Yeah. So those are the diet breaks. So that's kind of like the fourth kind of phase. You can kind of lump it into the fat loss phase if you want, but that's kind of the fourth distinction that we have. And then the fifth one is very similar to the diet breaks, but it's just what you would call it if you did it for a longer duration, which would be a maintenance phase. So, maintenance phase looks very similar to a diet break. So, you would bring calories up a little bit the first week, the second week, you'd pretty much jump up to maintenance. And then what you would do is you would just maintain there for an extended period of time, however long you wanted to, or however long it felt like your body actually needed to then maybe lose more weight if you still have more weight to lose, or maybe you've lost all the weight you want to lose and you just want to maintain that for life. So maintenance phases are like good long term if you like really, really long term if you've already hit your weight loss goal, but they're good for like semi long term, I guess. So like if I'm thinking long term, I'm thinking like a year or longer to like maintain your weight, right? Doing that is great if you've pretty much reached your goal. If you still have more weight you want to lose, but a short 2 week diet break just isn't really doing the trick of like giving you a reset, getting your energy levels back to normal, helping to manage hunger. If like that 2 week break isn't really doing it for you, you can go into a longer maintenance phase of even like 2, 3, 4 months to really reset things, really practice losing that weight you've lost prior, and really set yourself up to then feel like refreshed to jump into that like second spurt of a fat loss phase you want to do after that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to mention too, like it's been really cool for me to kind of get to know my body a little bit more as far as what it needs, and how yesterday Sunday, I think when I was doing my check-in, I was like, I need more food now. Please, like, let's get out of fat loss phase for a while. I feel like crap. I'm not sleeping. My workouts have tanked. I don't want to work out. I don't feel strong. And so now, like, just intuitively, I know how to get there. And when before, if I would have gone through that period, I just, who knows, I would have just been like, well, I just feel bad for a while and I'm going to keep pushing through. Um, so I think like that's been really eye-opening for me and really helpful to know what I need now. And I need my body needs some time with more food, and I already feel better. Like just over 2 days of increasing calories, I already feel better, have more energy, um, sleeping good again. So it's I don't know, that's just been a really good thing for me to understand about how my body's feeling so much better with the extra food and the nutrition that it needs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like some really eye opening things that you've seen or noticed or learned over these past 15 months of implementing all these phases is, like you said, what your body feels like during each of these phases. And you can tell, right? Like if you're in your priming phase of reverse diet, we're building your calories up to maintenance. We're not quite at maintenance. We're slowly building up. So you know what your body feels like week to week if you're in that phase. With the fat loss phase, you're eating less calories than what you burn. You know, like what that feels like to be in that phase, and you know what it feels like to be in that phase for too long, and you know when it's time to get out of that phase. You've learned what like being in a diet break feels like, of having that temporary like short-term increase in calories to help reset things. You know what it feels like to be in maintenance more long term, and you know what it feels like to be in a surplus or a building phase long term. So like that knowledge not only helps you to know when it's time to maybe move to the next phase, but it also helps you if you decide down the road, if you don't want to track your food anymore, if you don't track your food and for like let's say a week or maybe 2 weeks, and you start to feel really hungry, your sleep is really struggling, your performance in the gym is down, you probably know, hey, I'm actually probably in a deficit because this is exactly how I felt when I was in a fat loss phase for too long. So I know I need to increase my food. So you can use those clues that you've learned, like how your body feels depending on how much you're eating when you were tracking, and apply that to like periods where you decide not to track and make decisions based off of that. Um, So I think we've kind of covered like all 5 of the phases then. So just to kind of like recap, first phase was the priming phase, reverse diet, building your calories up to maintenance. A second phase we talked about was the building phase, which is kind of um, conditional. If you need to really put on more muscle to get leaner, then you can enter that, which is where we aim for calories a little bit higher than maintenance. Next phase we talked about, fat loss phase, bring calories down and implement these diet breaks, which is kind of the fourth phase we mentioned, periodically between. And then the fifth phase, the maintenance phase, is the end phase where like once you've achieved your goal and you really don't want to, like you don't need to lose any more weight, or you don't necessarily even want to change your body more, you just want to completely maintain where you're at. That's kind of the long-term route from there. Um, so I feel like we've, really went into depth and with all 5 of these. Anything else that like you really want to add kind of before we wrap up, Rebecca? That you want like anybody listening to this to remember about these phases, or anything that you experienced that you thought was like really key?
I think just overall, like I'm I'm kind of at the end of this fat loss phase and I'm 10 pounds heavier than when I started working with you. And like don't be afraid to gain weight. And I will, unless something unforeseen happens, I'm never gonna be back to that weight, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't matter. And I'm probably healthier than I've ever been, definitely stronger than I've ever been, and I wanna keep going and keep getting stronger, and so I know I'm gonna have to see that scale increase again, and my clothes are gonna get tight again, but that's okay because I know that I can get back to the point where I wanna be. So, yeah, just mentally, it's tough to have those breakthroughs, but it's doable. And I think I've said before, like your leanest self isn't necessarily your best self.
Yeah, I love that. Just the scale, it's a tool, but it's not the end all be all, and it doesn't dictate whether or not like you're actually having success or not with, improving your health or changing your body. And um like you said, like getting as lean as possible isn't, going to be a fulfilling life, and it's not going to be a fulfilling, like you're not going to feel good internally. And like gaining weight in some circumstances is actually like what you probably need to like feel the most confident. I think like we've talked about this many times. I think you're much more confident in your body now, 10 pounds heavier than what you were when you started.
Yeah, and I think the other key message that I if it were me, what I would have wanted to hear like 10 years ago or 5 years ago, you don't need to do endless amounts of cardio and running to lose weight. So that's the other thing that I used to love to run, honestly, and now I I'm okay without it. Like I'm okay with walking and so that's been really good for me and just gives my body a chance to recover better too. So,
Yeah, I love that. Well, thanks for hopping on, Rebecca, and going through that with me and kind of sharing your experiences through each. If you watch this, comment below if there was anything that was like you found really interesting or really eye opening. Of like, wow, like I never really thought about it that way, or I never really thought to even have like different phases in my journey. I just thought eat lower calories forever, and like that's how you see results. So definitely share that below. Appreciate you all for tuning in, and thanks again, Rebecca, for hopping on. And
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
yeah, and I'm sure it won't be the last one. So yeah, I will let you all go and let you go, Rebecca, and we will see you guys in the next one then.
Thank you.